I wasn't always alone. I know I once lived in a peaceful village hidden away by the cliffside, a peaceful town, a loving family, a once normal life. Till the giants and dragons came. They appeared out of nowhere and smashed the towns into dust and ash. Everyone was caught or, or eaten alive, and I was the only one who escaped that day. I managed to escape to the kingdom of Sirius, but when I was told what happened to my home, they simply laughed it off. Of course, they wouldn't believe me. With no other relatives or friends in this kingdom, Yin felt alone and outcast. The gossip of Yin's story spread through the town, and they were quickly seen as a crazy person, with their tales of man-eating giants and dragons. So Yin would spend most of their days reading near the sides of the cliffs, on the outskirts of the kingdom. They would read many books from the history to fantasy being their favorite. One day, while hiding out at their favorite spot on the cliffside, they noticed that there was a change. The cliff went out more than it once did, and the grass was darker than usual. They slowly stepped on the grass, which was simply soft, and they happily sat down on the soft grass and read along, to no one in particular, all too aware of the giant that was listening in. This became a routine for the next year as Yin returned to the spot to read their stories to no one in particular. As they read, they would find themselves slowly drifting to sleep. Yet when they wake up, they find themselves someplace far away from their special spot, which seemed to have disappeared. Yet the next day, it reappeared in the same place as usual. When one day an army of men came striding towards the outer village of the kingdom, all armed with swords and fire arrows, they began to raid the village as screams and four commanders could be heard. Yin watched in terror as they rounded women and children, as they killed the men and knights. Yin trembled as they stepped back, wanting to disappear and not be seen. Suddenly their footsteps ran out of the ground and stayed on it as they began to fall, and everything went black. What is that? Who's on top of my head? The giant wondered. Every day the green-haired giant would rest by the cliffside and listen to the crashing of the waves. Then one day he felt something, a human, wandering on his head. He began to sweat nervously as he felt the human happily sit down on his head. Humans always ran away from him because of his inhuman size, and an average-sized human would be the size of his hand. Yet he was not really threatened along his peers, for he was the smallest among them. So to escape them, he would rest He would rest by the sides of the cliff. This was the first time a human was this close to him. He could feel them sit down or something lay down on his head and read to him. He could hear and feel his heart pound in his chest when the human dozed off on his head. He slowly and surely picked them off his head and softly placed them in his palms. His cheeks turned a cherry red as he watched them curl up, snuggling into his hands. They looked so peaceful as the wind blew through their hair-colored hair. They were so small and fragile, yet so smart and full of promise. They were the most beautiful thing he could ever see. He could never understand why his peers would rather eat these tiny humans than help them. Sadly, those moments never lasted forever. When the kind giant hears the calls, with a heavy heart, he slowly placed his favorite human down on a safe ground near the village and left for the Forbidden Mountains. "Deku, where were you?" Shoto, the leader of the giants, called out. But that day was different. They didn't fall asleep near the end of their book, but gasped in horror. Izuku began to sweat, worried if the human had figured out that they were sitting on his head this entire time. Then suddenly they fell. It happened so slowly as Izuku watched the tiny human fall off his head. With wide-eyed colored eyes full of fear as they blacked out, Izuku quickly caught the tiny human with his large hands. Izuku turned to see the village was being raided. He didn't want to leave this human anywhere near here, but also didn't want to leave them alone, so he held the human close to his chest as he whisked them away to his home in the Forbidden Mountains. I'm still alive? How? I fell off the cliff. I should be dead, shouldn't I? Yin wondered as they forced their eyes open. As they slowly sat up, their eyes slowly took in their surroundings. It was a dark, rocky cave that was lit by hundreds of half-melted candles. All of the furniture was obviously too big to be any human. They looked down at themselves to find them lying on a makeshift bed of all different kinds of clothes. Suddenly the door of the cave opened, and in stepped a giant with dark, wavy green hair and big, green, soft eyes to match. At first, Yin just watched in shock as the kind-looking giant tended to his tromedes, which housed livestock of sheep, all content inside their large glass box. Yin could feel their heart flutter as the kind smile on his face, but it quickly froze as their eyes both shrieked in shock as they both stumbled back. Izuku quickly snapped out of it. First, he saw the human was about to fall off the table. He quickly ran to save them from falling again. Hey, you're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you, Izuku said softly. So you're not going to eat me? Like the others? Yin trembled. No, I'm a vegetarian, Izuku smiled nervously. Oh, that's nice. So why am I here? Yin asked slowly. Well, thought you didn't want to return to that village because, it's being destroyed, so I brought you here, Izuku explained. Well, that's nice of you, but why me? Yin asked nervously. Well, so you were the first human to ever be so close to me. You were so brave to sleep on my head, Izuku stuttered. I love it when you would read to me every day. It was a nice company. So you're just lonely? Yin asked. Yeah, I guess you could say that. You're just the first being that was ever kind to me, and I just didn't want to see you go yet. Izuku trembled as he rested his head on the table as he tried to cover his red face. Yin couldn't help but chuckle at this giant's bashfulness. This was probably the first time he ever talked to a girl. Well, thank you for saving me. My name is Yin. What's yours? Yin asked with a smile. Izuku Midoriya. It was nice to meet you. Izuku blushed as he felt Yin's tiny hands on his finger. And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.